Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Brian Zissel. I'm a major account manager for Nutanix, and we're excited to be a sponsor here this year for the AWS Public Sector Summit. What a turnout, standing room only. It's a little hot in here, so we'll try and move things along quickly. But a little bit about Nutanix. Again, like I said, we're excited to be a sponsor here at the AWS Summit. So Nutanix, we embarked on a journey a couple of years ago in the federal space with hyper-converged infrastructure, essentially taking storage, components, and compute and virtualization and combining them into a single appliance. So when a lot of folks ask, what is hyper-converged infrastructure? What does Nutanix do? We consider it like the iPhone of the data center. So about 10 or 15 years ago, before smartphones, a lot of us carried around calculators, flashlights, video cameras, GPSs, all these different components. And then Steve Jobs and Apple came along and they said, hey world, what if we took all these different components, made them a software app on a single device that's easy to use? Here we are that many years later, with everybody using smartphones, whether 80 years old or kids today. So essentially that's what we're trying to do and we are doing in the federal data centers today. So since we've started shipping appliances in 2011, Nutanix has over 300 federal customers to date. So we've come a long way and we've kind of morphed from a hyper-converged company into what we consider ourselves now as the enterprise cloud company. So what a lot of folks, like about AWS is the cloud-like capability, the simplicity, the flexibility, allowing to make, IT agile, right? In the federal government, we're constrained a lot by buying cycles and the FAR and project planning and how long it takes to get time to value. So that's why something like a cloud-like public cloud is much easier to consume. So Nutanix is doing that with its on-prem automation capabilities, orchestration, self-service portals, all built into a single platform, right? With our partners like AWS, we have our AWS Cloud Connect features built in, so you can start doing backups to the cloud day one. So essentially, that's what the federal government, over 300 of our customers are starting to see is those capabilities today. We actually have our .next, our large user conference, coming up June 28th to the 30th at National Harbor at the Gaylord. So in a couple weeks, so if you folks are definitely interested, I would check that out. Over 5,000 customers registered today. But again, we're excited to be part of this conference. We're excited to be a partner. And I'm just up here to introduce both Kyle and Matt, who are both solutions architects with AWS, and they're going to discuss cloud management tools. Thanks, everybody. Enjoy.
All right. Well, thank you, Brian, and thanks to all of you for choosing to spend the next few minutes with us here on this lovely afternoon. So cloud management tools, what exactly does that mean? And how can that help you better utilize your investment and your cycles that you work on with AWS? So you can probably visualize yourself at some point on this line, on this representative graph of adoption on AWS. You might be just starting out with the cloud on the left side of that graph, doing some experimentation, a few instances, a few of your employees or a few of your engineers working on capability in the cloud. Or you may be further along that continuum with significant workloads, significant investment, and significant scale and growth with your usage of cloud and your usage on AWS. Regardless of where you are on that line, as you scale up, we want to make sure you understand some of the capabilities that we have in the AWS platform to help you manage and control that growth so it's done in a structured, orderly, and productive fashion so you can extract the most value possible from your usage of AWS. So growth is good, but you want to make the proper investments in education and in user training up front to both manage that growth and control how users adopt and grow into the cloud. You want to do it in such a way where your users can experiment, where they can try new things, take advantage of that elasticity, of that scale that we offer in the cloud. They can try new capabilities, new experiments, new techniques across a variety of device types. They can scale up resources and infrastructure on demand in a self-service fashion. And as your organization adopts, you certainly have the global delivery capability that the cloud offers, and you also have the ability to pull in and collaborate with people and deliver new experiences that you may not have had before with a traditional computing model. But growth can also be a challenge. If the cloud is new to your organization, certainly your staff, your developers, your engineers, your partners that you're working with are going to have to mature their cycles and invest some time and learn how to leverage that cloud computing capability. They can potentially make some mistakes as they experiment, and those mistakes can be Could potentially costly if they over-provision and leave something provisioned on for a significant period of time without realizing it. But they can also be, less serious. But either way, there could be some potential challenges as you grow and scale into the cloud. But you want to make sure your staff can be fully utilized, fully productive, and take advantage of these resources that they now have access to. So you've got a couple of options to manage the growth of the cloud within your organization. There's really kind of two extremes. You can decentralize, open up the gates of innovation, let folks experiment, let them try new things, let them test and develop and take advantage of what the cloud can offer. Or you could potentially choose a more controlled, locked-down environment that would protect you from misconfiguration or potential risk of the cloud, but at the same time, restrict and potentially reduce some of the innovation potential and capability that your folks can get with using the cloud. So what we have with the suite of AWS management capabilities that we're going to talk about here in the next several minutes is kind of a middle-of-the-road approach. You can think of gutter guards on a bowling lane. So it's a way to keep that innovation alive and let folks continue to innovate and leverage the cloud, but at the same time, do it in a managed, standardized, and highly monitored fashion. So we've got capability we'll talk about where you can provision self-service templated capability to deploy infrastructure across AWS, as well as catalog capability to manage that collection or that portfolio of your self-service templates. We'll talk about ways you can monitor the usage and overall configuration within AWS, and other ways to control the scalability and growth of your usage in the cloud. So we've got 5 main areas of management tools, or 5 main categories of management tools within AWS, a total of 7 services we're going to talk about. The first couple that I'll discuss are resource provisioning. And we've got a capability within AWS called Cloud Formation, and then a similar capability called Service Catalog. Has anybody used Cloud Formation in their adoption of AWS? Good, a couple hands. So hopefully at the end of the session today, if a few more of you can go and experiment with Cloud Formation. What Cloud Formation is a way to create standardized templates of infrastructure, of your environment, of a collection of AWS resources, provision those resources in a controlled and standardized fashion, and push updates to those resources in a managed capability. It's self-documenting. The term infrastructure as code applies to Cloud Formation. And we'll show some examples of what Cloud Formation looks like, as well as some reference examples of Cloud Formation capabilities. So we've got a collection of AWS quick starts. These are pre-configured, prepackaged from AWS or from our partner ecosystem, Cloud Formation templates of a variety of solution areas. So we've got Cloud Formation templates that can deploy a representative example of DevOps capabilities from a variety of the DevOps community and vendors that you may be familiar with. We also have Cloud Formation templates that can deploy a reference model of database infrastructure, analytics, security, and a number of other capabilities that you can roll these capabilities out in your environment. And it's kind of a learning experience. You can look at these Cloud Formation templates and modify those and incorporate those and build your own custom Cloud Formation templates on some of these representative examples. For those of you in the federal government community, we have a representative example Cloud Formation template that complies with a number of the NIST 853 controls. So if you have to comply with FedRAMP or with some of the NIST controls, you can look at how AWS has implemented a representative environment in our Cloud Formation template. You can review the controls that we've documented in a documentation matrix and learn from that and build your own Cloud Formation model on top of that. So how you build Cloud Formation templates within AWS, we've got a sort of a drag and drop GUI management capability or design capability where you can build Cloud Formation templates. We also have the raw code both in JSON and YAML where you can control and configure how you're going to deploy and manage and integrate your resources within Cloud Formation. You can define your dependencies, you can define variables, so that as people deploy an infrastructure, again, from a very standardized control, so you know what they're deploying, you can provide them input where they can select and choose certain parameters that are required for that configuration. And of course, you can integrate it with a CI/CD pipeline. We've got pretty good documentation of CloudFormation code templates or snippets of code that you can use if you want to see if you're debugging or developing something with CloudFormation. The documentation is pretty rich, so you can see how different pieces work together. Here's an example of EC2 and configuring an elastic IP address and the types of code that would go into that CloudFormation template to control that configuration of those EC2 instances. So once you've developed and defined multiple cloud formations in your enterprise, a management tool that brings these together is a capability called AWS Service Catalog. So we had several hands go up with cloud formation. Have any folks experimented with AWS Service Catalog? A fewer number of hands. Okay, so Service Catalog, it's the next step up that growth line of cloud adoption and cloud management adoption. And Service Catalog allows you to create a collection of portfolios of solutions. Those portfolios would be a collection of CloudFormation templates, but it's a way to then control and publish access to those templates so users can implement that capability in a defined and structured fashion. It empowers users to deploy and provision those resources that they've been granted permissions to. An administrator can control the framework or that structured foundation that they deploy those resources from, and you have the version control capability that goes along with it. All of this can be done self-service through the provisioning that you grant your users access to with that Service Catalog capability. So here's an example. We're not going to get super deep in a lot of these tools today, but really today was just about providing awareness of the depth of capabilities and the suite of capabilities you have. And if you'd like to certainly go deeper, reach out to your AWS team that supports you, and they'd love to come by and have a more detailed discussion. But you can define your template, define your constraints, define your users that have permission to deploy that template. From a control and permissions perspective here, this is kind of interesting. So you may have a situation where you do not want users to create VPCs, or do not want users to have the permission to request IP addresses or add an internet gateway to a VPC, but that capability may be required for a solution that they need to deploy. So users don't necessarily need the underlying permissions to do all the configuration as part of that solution they're deploying from this cloud formation that's part of the Service Catalog portfolio. But as long as they have permission to that portfolio, the portfolio will then have permission to execute and deploy those resources. So it's a way for delegating and controlling the permissions that users have to engage in certain activities in the environment. So with that, Matt's going to come up and talk about a few other management capabilities, and I'll turn it over to Matt.
Oh, thank you. Hey, how's it going, guys? So, really quickly, we're moving on to configuration management. I just want to ask, for how many of you is this the first time coming to an AWS Summit? Just a quick show of hands. Yeah, so a fair amount of you guys, right? And the reason I ask that is because for Amazon, if you haven't been here or you haven't seen any of our sessions previously, you may or may not know that almost all of our features and services come from customers like you. So we get your feedback, we take it back to our development teams, we come up with new processes and services. And EC2 Systems Manager is no exception to that. So what wound up happening was we had a lot of customers come back and say, hey, managing all of this infrastructure across hybrid, on-prem, and the cloud, hundreds or thousands of servers, it's really complex and it's really costly. We know that there are tools out there to accomplish this, but how would Amazon accomplish this, right? And that's really what EC2 Systems Manager is looking to accomplish. And so what it is a lightweight client that you install on either a Linux or Windows operating system. It connects back to our main service in the cloud, and you can set up various policies or rules or commands that you can send to these. So an example would be you want to do a quick run command. Like you want to do a yum update. You want to create an automated process for creating AMIs to manage your gold images. You want to set up policies, like you want to make sure that only port 443 is open on your firewall and not port 80, right? And how do you enforce this? And how do you create the scripts that'll do that for you automatically? And that's what we're looking to do here. So essentially what you do is you create documents, and a document is a JSON file. So you create the type that you want. So it could either be a run command, it could be a policy, like I was saying before, where you could say, hey, I only want certain aspects of the firewall to be modified, and if it's modified, change it back. You can set the retention period for that. You can also set the checkup time for that. You know, you want to check every 15 minutes, do you want to check every hour, every day? And then you have the automated scripts, where if you want to say, hey, there's a new Amazon Linux instance out, or Amazon Linux AMI, I want to create a completely new base image, and then manage those gold images here. So you can set up all your steps, like install Python, install Apache, right? Install like custom scripts that you guys create. So then you can save all of this here, and then you push it through the console, and it goes down to all of your devices. Now, it doesn't use RDP or SSH. It goes over 443, and it's much more secure. You don't have to open up RDP over the internet. You don't have to open up SSH over the internet to all the Amazon IPs. It automatically registers and connects. Over on the left-hand side, you can actually see that there's example scripts that we give you. And just like with the Amazon Marketplace, you can get scripts, and you can provide scripts to the community so that you can better enrich and control your environment. So then we also have OpsWorks and Chef Automate. So any of you guys using OpsWorks already? A few hands. And anybody using Chef in their environments? Or anybody know what Chef is? All right, a little bit better. So Chef is a similar paradigm, right? So you have a lightweight client you install on your servers, and it connects to a Chef server up in the cloud. For Amazon, what we're doing here is we actually manage that for you. So if you have an existing Chef server, you can import your cookbooks, you can import your recipes, and then you can use those to launch your infrastructure automatically, right? What's also great about this, to what Kyle was talking about before, when you're using Cloud Formation and you're using Service Catalog, you can use Cloud Formation to basically deploy anything you want, including OpsWorks and Chef Automate. So you can create a fully automated Chef deployment for your developers using the pre-existing Cloud Formation templates, right? And so you don't have to give IAM access to your developers to actually launch EC2. You can just let them do that through Cloud Formation and through Service Catalog, and then have all of the servers pre-launched and built out, launched and built out at runtime, right? And managed through the central repository on Chef. This also supports on-prem, and it supports your local, your hybrid infrastructure as well. So you can do it in your local data centers. You could do it anywhere where you have connectivity to this managed Chef server. So moving on to monitoring and performance. Are you guys all familiar with CloudWatch? Have you all used CloudWatch? Yeah, a lot of head shaking, yes. Yeah. So this is another problem that customers came to us with. And they say, hey, monitoring in the cloud, monitoring in general, not just in the cloud, but monitoring in general is a big task, right? What metrics should you take? What metrics are easy to get to? Like, what clients should you install? And what CloudWatch, effectively was trying to do, and does very well, is collect information directly from the hypervisor. So we can get your CPU and disk utilization. We can get your network utilization. We can't get your memory, right? Because based on our shared security model, everything above the OS is you. But what you can do is you can create custom scripts and custom metrics. So you could actually take in metrics like memory usage. You could take in metrics like the average response time of your application, right? And you can actually use those to create alarms and alerts, right? So you can create alerts that will contact your full team. Like, hey, CPU utilization for my web tier fleet is above 90%. right? And maybe you had an auto-scaling group that was capped at 10 servers. Well, someone's going to have to go in there and do it. Or better yet, you could have, you could have those notifications go to another application for self-healing. Maybe that would automatically increase your auto-scaling group or add more servers, right? So here's an example here. If you take a look, you can actually create custom dashboards over here. This is an example of a CloudWatch screenshot where you actually have multiple CPUs for multiple instances and their utilization here. And the other thing that's very important to look at is the granularity by default is 5 minutes. You can set this to 1 minute. And really, like the big benefit for CloudWatch is for troubleshooting, right? So like when somebody calls in, like when I used to work in support, and someone calls in and says, hey, my website is slow or my web server is looking slow, the first thing that we do on our end is start looking at your CloudWatch metrics, because those are so important, right? You might say, hey, the network is slow. Well, it turns out your network's not actually being tacked at all. It's really your EBS IO, right? So AWS management tools. We have AWS CloudTrail and AWS Config and Config rules. So AWS CloudTrail. It's really important now that we have infrastructure as code, and we're deploying all of these things through APIs. How are we gonna monitor this, right? And that's important, right? Because you need to know like who's doing what, when, and from where. So CloudTrail, and if you've been out on the floor yet today or yesterday, you'll actually see that there's quite a few vendors. You have like Loggly, you have Splunk, you have CloudCheckr, and all these companies are actually providing services that read from CloudTrail, right? There's tie-ins, all of your API accesses. So when somebody's making an API call to run an instance, it's saved in these logs, and then those logs are saved in S3. So you get the 11 nines of durability. You can access them directly. And it's great for governance, right? So you can use any one of those programs, any one of those applications to help with your governance policies, or you can write your own scripts, right? So we have a lot of customers, and what they do is they actually go in, they ingest those logs, and then they find out what's going on. So let's take a quick look at an example here, right? So let's say I'm using federated access, right? Using federated access, my AD domain, I'm using SAML. Nobody should be logging in with the root domain at all, right? So root should only be for break glass, something's gone completely wrong, I need to log in with my MFA token, of course, and make some sort of fix. So for example here, if I might actually look at all of the APIs that are coming in, and if anything comes in as root, I might send out an email for the entire team, right? And like contact the director and say, hey, someone's logging in as root. That should not be the case, right? And take action on that. You can also see when the event time was, what the request IDs and the event IDs are. These are very important if you're running into any kind of issues. And you need to contact support. Like we actually need these event IDs and request IDs in order to find what's going on in the back end for you. And then you can also see what was actually launched, right? So in this event, it was an instance run. You have the AMI, the instance ID, and the subnet, right? And, amongst other attributes. And if you take a look on the right-hand side over here under config timeline, you'll see this little watch. And that actually brings us to the next product, which is AWS Config and Config rules. So again, with AWS Config, customers were saying, hey, it's great that you provide CloudTrail and all, right? But we want an easier way of managing and viewing these APIs and the changes in our infrastructure, right? Like, we love Amazon. We love the applications that we can create. We love clickers, and but what we really need is for you guys to help us build out a tracking system the Amazon way, right? So that's what we did here, right? It's another one of those customer requests, And it supports EC2, EBS, and VPC. And what we do here is we actually create a timeline. And it shows you, hey, like this is when it started. Here are the changes that have happened, right? It's great for change management systems internally. If you're going to make changes, hey, we're going to create new autoscaling groups. That'll actually show you the relations. So if I have a VPC, it'll show you all of the relations to that VPC, like what instances are attached, what security groups are there, what ENIs are there, well, what's been changed, right? Has the routing tables been changed? Have the subnets been changed? And this is great for troubleshooting, right? Because you might say, hey, we lost connectivity to the web server, right? Or we lost connectivity to our jump box. What changed? Did the security group change, right? Did the subnet change? Did you guys, did somebody change the routing table or the routes on the VGW? These are all things that you can see through EC2 Config. And you also have continuous assessment, right? So we have AWS CloudTrail, AWS config rules. And those config rules are effectively lambdas. So what we're doing is we're actually taking your CloudTrail logs, we're looking at those API calls, and then you can actually write code against those, right? So rather than doing it on your own and creating your own infrastructure, we do it for you and let you leverage things like Lambda to accomplish this. I'll give you a quick example. So I have a customer that created something similar to this. But this was before we had config and config rules. But you could easily do it with config. And basically it was called the Death Star. And what the Death Star did is if developers were launching their own instances and they didn't put the proper tags in. And so what they wanted was, what's the environment, right? Is it dev test prod? What's the department? Is it HR or engineering? Is it the email services? Did the engineer put their name in, and like in their email address? Did they put in their department head? And then they also had what they called leasing. So they had these leases that they could put in. They were just these random hashes. And if there wasn't a proper random hash, that could be checked to see if that was a proper, valid lease. Then what the Death Star would do is it would email the team and say, hey, there's a server here that just got launched, and there aren't enough tags on it, or it's not properly provisioned. You have 24 hours to either update or we're going to destroy it. And so that's something that you could easily accomplish with AWS Config. Rather than creating your own infrastructure and your own servers, you could actually do this with the config rules and Lambda. So a quick overview of it here. We have the timeline up at the top. You can see there were 2 changes that were done on September 1st. You can see that this is a VPC, and you can see the CIDR blocks. And then you can see what the changes were. So you see that this EC2 instance was launched with the ENI that was attached to it. If we were actually to expand this relationships tab, you would see all the instances and ENIs that are attached to this. So finally, we come to resource optimization. So we have AWS Trusted Advisor. Has anybody here used Trusted Advisor? Yeah, not many. It's an interesting thing because it's such a great tool. And even when I was in support and I was at TAM, not many customers actually get in here and use it. But it's actually really great. So it provides things like cost optimization, performance optimization, things of that nature. And one of the other great things about this too is that it's one of those services, just like with config or with CloudTrail, like you don't have to write any code to go view it. You can log into the console right now and look at the health of your infrastructure, right? So like with a lot of these tools, you can just already go in. Like you don't have to write code. You can just go in, see what's going on, check the health, right? And as you get more sophisticated and more advanced, you can write that code that you want. You can customize it. You can add in self-healing, right? So with Trusted Advisor and the cost optimization, typically what you'll see here are like reserved instances, right? So you see like what kind of savings can I get with a reserved instance? What kind of savings can I get with my EC2 instances that are they're over provisioned and underutilized, right? My EBS volumes that are underutilized. And so we can see that right here. So here's an example of the screen. You'll see, you have your dashboard over here. You have cost optimization at the top. Excuse me. And here with it's relatively minor savings. $5.50 for 4 EBS volumes. But what if that was like 10% of your fleet, right? Like what if you had 1,000 servers? What if it was 25% of your fleet and you didn't know? You just weren't right-sized. Rather than trying to write scripts or look through the CloudTrail or CloudWatch manually and find out, hey, most of my instances are under 25% utilization. Well, we provide that for you, and so it helps you right-size your infrastructure. And in reality too, like this is a competitive advantage for you, right? For any of you partners out there, if you're building these things out, to do it cheaper and more effective, is savings on the bottom line, right? So moving on to performance. Performance is the other side of the spectrum. So these are instances that are, like 90% or more utilization, like EBS volumes that are high utilization, things of that nature. And so over here, we can see service limit for all of your services, or for most of your services. Unfortunately, I'll be honest here, it doesn't have every service and every limit, but it helps you out with the major ones, like EC2 limits, like how many stacks you have, how many Kinesis shards you can have. So it helps you get ahead of your infrastructure as you're doing your development ops. One thing that I would say too is, in addition to this, if you have an account team, right? If you have an account manager, if you have an SA, if you have TAMs from enterprise support, reach out to them. Like they'll go through this with you. I've done this with customers, and then let us know what your roadmaps are, right? Because we'll actually help you get ahead of things like large events that you're going to do, right? And then we have security. So moving on to security, these are things like password length, password complexity. Do you have numbers? Do you have capital letters, lowercase letters? Do you have special characters? Do you have MFA on your root password, right? Do you have security groups that are open to the world? Do you care if they're open to the world or not, right? And so here's an example where you don't have CloudTrail turned on. And for Amazon, if you don't have CloudTrail turned on, this is a big thing for us because you don't have the granularity that you need to be successful, right? The other thing too is even if you're not using certain regions, like you say, hey, I'm doing with federal, I'm only in the U.S. So all I care about is GovCloud. All I care about is US East 1 and 2, US West 1 and 2, right? Is that a good methodology? Not really, right? Because things happen. Developers accidentally upload code to GitHub. Keys get uploaded accidentally, and if you're not taking in logs from Singapore, and someone who's a black hat gets your keys from GitHub, and then starts launching Bitcoin farms in Singapore, you probably want to know about that, right? You want to know where it came from, who did it, right? And you probably want to know about it before you get the bill. So that's one of those things where you really want to make sure that you have it turned on in every region. And if you do have an account team with TAMs and they come on site, we will hound you about this until you get it turned on. We've had multiple customers that I've personally worked with where you came to them every month, you need to turn this on. And then we have fault tolerance. Right? And fault tolerance, things like unevenly scaled, elastic load balancers, S3 buckets that don't have logging turned on, RDS instances that don't have backups, EBS volumes that don't have backups, snapshots. And we actually can see this over here. So for example, over here you can actually see all the volumes, and the reason is they've never had a snapshot. So, quick show of hands, how many of you guys are doing snapshots regularly? Yeah, less than 0.25% of the room, right? And that's unfortunate, but at the same time, there's certain reasons why you may or may not do that, right? And one of the things that's nice about Trusted Advisor is that you can actually turn off those alerts. So for example, if I have a web server and I have basically a customized script, and I collect my logs off of it every 5 minutes and I dump it into an S3 bucket, and I'm not really saving anything that's actually valuable on the web server, do I care about the snapshot? Is that entire server ephemeral to me? If so, then I don't need snapshots, so I can just ignore those, right? But I might have volumes that are really important. I might have my Oracle database on there, right? I might have my app servers. I might have maybe my Bastion server, right, with all my customized scripts, or a management server. And those things you probably do want to have EBS snapshots on. So that's something to take away with that. Also, even with snapshots, it's good to have like a management tool around that too. And as you build those tools, you'll actually get better at managing the services themselves. So that's everything that we had. We'll open up the floor to questions if you guys have any. Kyle will come back up here as well. Hey, you sir.
I ran into an issue where in our environment we've all got IAM roles that we have user IDs, right? But I was looking at CloudTrail events, and they were showing root was doing activities, and it kind of freaked me out. Turned out it was an auto-scaling. So does Cloud Config show if I'm seeing activities by root, if it's related to like an auto-scaling event?
Yeah, so sometimes it'll show, it'll actually show the service as well. So like there's examples where it'll say like, hey, it'll say auto-scaling, or it'll say like RDS, AWS RDS made this on your behalf, right? So you'll see that in there.
Associates that pretty prominently.
Yeah, and then you can also take a look at, you can also open up like a support case and then provide that access key and then find out who the access key is. So typically, like on the Amazon side, we'll look and be like, oh yeah, this was Amazon behind the scenes performing that. Yeah. Any other questions? Hey.
We're heavy users of Cloud Formation, but there are a few services that don't have Cloud Formation ability, like Cloud Search and Elastic Transcode or presets. Is there an effort to make sure that every service has every knob Cloud Formationable?
That's something that the team has been working on. There's other tools too, like Terraform. Like Terraform is extremely fast. Admittedly, they got some of them on there before we did. And I mean, that's the nature of it, unfortunately. But yeah, like in general, we do try to have everything deployable with Cloud Formation. Anybody else?
Any other questions?
You talked about EC2 Systems Manager and OpsWorks Chef Automate. There's some overlapping capability there. Is there time and a place for each?
You could use both. I mean, you could just, for example, like you could only use Chef Automate if you wanted, right? So you could, because it's basically just an automated, like self-managed Chef server. So if you just wanted us to take that load off of you, like we can do that. If you just want to use OpsWorks, you could just use that. Because OpsWorks is basically just letting you create stacks, and then it lets you clearly define those layers in those stacks. Like here's my load balancing layer, here's my web tier, here's another load balancing layer, here's my app tier, here's another load balancing layer, here's my first set of deep databases, right? And so like you can define all of those with OpsWorks. And then like each one of those layers could have tie-ins to Chef, or they could not, right? So my database tier could be RDS, right? And RDS, I'm not going to be able to use Chef at all. So you can mix and match however you like. And then you can also use it with on-prem too. So like if it wants to come, you come over your direct connect or your VPN, connect to that Chef server, and then do your deployments on-prem as well, or even in another cloud if you had it.
So slightly tangent, do you have service registry, service discovery as well as part of AWS, or we have to use external components like Netflix, OSS, and other stuff to use that?
For service discovery?
Yeah, for service discovery and service registry, Are there built-in components to use within AWS for registry and discovery? And do they closely work with ECS, ECR, and Cloud Formation?
Do you have one? Yeah, do you have a use case?
Yeah, microservices-based architecture. We are using Cloud Formation to actually kind of create the entire infrastructure. So in the microservice architecture, there are more components. Like either you could go Kubernetes and Terraform, or you could go Cloud Formation, ECR, ECS. But in this whole ecosystem, do we see that there will be a need for like a service discovery, service registry? How does that fit in this ecosystem, and where do they fit in? Or would you be the right person to answer that question?
I wouldn't necessarily be the right person. That's but I could, if you want to come and give me your card afterwards, then I can try and ask around the team. Anybody else? Oh, right there.
A lot of great tools, which is wonderful.
Yeah.
When are they going to be adopted into GovCloud?
Yeah.
Seeing how this is a
We honestly are trying to move everything into GovCloud, and also we're trying to get everything FedRamped. I don't have a specific timeline, but if you want to give me your contact information, then we can talk. Anybody else?
Thank you. Remember to fill out your evaluations, please.
Yeah. Thank you so much.